Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Flashback Part 2. We had those that tuned in last week, enjoyed what they heard. So this week we are live in the studio with Brian Simmons, and we have Cephas Williams and Martin Glynn online. We will be talking to us throughout the evening. The subject matter that we're talking about today is change coming for our young people to feel equality in British society? So it's a big one we've got for you today. We just want to kind of talk our way through it, understand where we're coming from, look at what we feel about equality and understand what equality is. So hopefully you'll help us through. Please log in and send us any comments that you'd like to talk about online through our comments box. We'll try and answer those questions for you as well. So, Brian.
Good evening, Tara.
Let's just give you a little feedback on Brian. Brian has worked as a practitioner, a group worker trainer and facilitator in partnership with voluntary and private sectors over the last 20 years. He has had a long-standing commitment to the developing supporting provisions for marginalised communities, particularly young children and young people across a variety of communities. So welcome, Brian. I know we've had you on the show before over last year when we were doing different things, and you were helping us out with the podcasts online and with the Zoom calls online as well. So welcome, nice to have you back.
Thank you, Tara. And it wasn't a typo when you said 20 years. I know I look young looking, but yes, I have been working for 20 plus years. I'm not telling you exactly how much, but it's been quite a while.
So do you want to tell me a bit about what you do?
Well, the company I work for, organizer I work for, is First Contact 2.0. And we try to kind of, when organisation or individuals had a bad experience in terms of with the system, how can we change that bad experience or enhance that, or trying to change that mindset, knowing that the experience is a bad experience, but they actually need to still engage in a system, whether it's mental health, whether it's a hospital, or the police. We can try to change that mindset. So that's kind of what we do at the present moment in time, plus other things, but in terms of that is a majority of thing I do when it comes to young people at the present moment in time.
Okay, well thanks Brian, thanks for being here. So next one up, we have Martin Glynn. Now, Martin gained a PhD from Birmingham City University in 2013. He specialises in
the question I want to consider is
theory, looking at the black men's desistance from crime. Martin has written and directed performance works, as well as writing radio and theatre plays. Previously, an arts development consultant and a founder of Black UK, Being Liberated and Knowledgeable, an organisation that encourages arts as a tool for personal transformation. So welcome, Martin. How are you this evening? Martin, can you hear me? Martin?
Martin's muted his mic.
No, he's not. Martin, woo! Okay, right. Martin, can you hear me? Okay, Martin can't hear me. So we'll go straight on to Cephas. Cephas is the founder and photographer behind the groundbreaking 56 Black Men campaign. Since launching his campaign in December 2018, Cephas has gained regional, national and global recognition for creating something that visually highlights the disturbing facts that we see in our society. Cephas believes everyone should have a fair chance to change their own narrative. So welcome, Cephas. Thank you for being here. Sorry, apologies at the moment. For some reason, we're not hearing.
Can you hear me now?
That's it.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, so I couldn't hear you for a second, but I can hear you now. Blessings.
Perfect. Okay.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Martin, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Right. I'm going to just ask you both a little bit about your backgrounds and where you're coming from right now. Do you want to go first? Who wants to go first? Who's going to take the question?
Martin can lead, man. Martin's been out here for a very long time. Martin can go first, man.
Greetings, everybody. I turned 64 this year, 3 kids, 5 grandchildren, a great-grandchild. I'm a criminologist. I've got a doctorate. I've done so many different things with my life. But The one thing that's constant is to demonstrate that transformation and change and that narrative that Cephas talks about is in our hands. And my job is to show that historically, transformation and change comes through struggle. Sometimes that struggle internationally is armed, but where I'm at right now in the UK is the intellectual struggle. It's to make sense of chaos and to present that narrative. And my role now as an older person is less about me standing in front with jazz hands and enabling the next generation to give them the tools that they need to change their lives. So that's essentially where I'm at right now.
Thank you. And Cephas?
Appreciate you inviting me on, and thanks for the kind words and the introduction. My focus currently is just using the position I hold strategically within the landscape to bridge the gap between what I'm coining as enlightened soft power and all things Black Renaissance. I guess I've done a lot of things over the past decade and within my lifetime. Started businesses, some been successful, some failed. I wasn't really focused on the Black conversation initially. I was focused on things that affected, was perhaps more broader. I was going to say affected everybody, but the Black conversation affects everybody too. And I went through a couple of things along my journey that made me kind of do a 360, and maybe in this conversation we can get there. And as such, I started focusing on the Black conversation, released something called 56 Black Men. And then my wife was due to give birth to our first son on the 26th of May 2020, and then the day before George Floyd is murdered. So that put me in a weird space. And to wrap up, in that period, I had phone calls from a lot of people and messages from hundreds of people, thousands. But it was 5 very influential white men that called me, who I've built relationships with over the years, and they were kind of like, well, in a nutshell, like, what can we do? You know what I mean? And for me, I was very tired of just us banging our head almost on a brick wall, and no one's really opening the door and nothing's really changing. And for me, it's about us getting to a place of empowerment and pushing an agenda of empowerment as opposed to one that speaks to empathy. So even when I talk about bringing in light and soft power, and those very often white men that sit at the top of systems and influence, and positioning that next to Black Renaissance, it's not in a way that speaks to charity, it's in a way that speaks to change. And a lot of the times the things that we want to see change are not necessarily within our control. So it's those people that need to actually start to change and reconstruct the systems. And so that's part of the journey I'm on. So I started something called the Black British Network. We've signed up 17 of some of the largest organizations in the world and the country to work with us to dismantle systemic racism and improve the landscape for the Black community, and create an equal playing field. So that's what I'm currently focused on in a nutshell. But I've, again, done a host of things over the years and do a number of things behind the scenes in it. So, but again, appreciate you guys having me, and nice to be sat with someone like Martin. We caught up briefly before the chat, and just from hearing what he's done, I'm keen to hear more. You know what I mean? He sounds like someone that's been doing a lot, I'm saying, in the community and in life. So yeah, man, looking forward to the conversation.
Definitely. I mean, I'm grateful to have you all on board today. I think it's we should have a really nice discussion coming through today on this subject. So I've not introduced myself. I'm Tara Munroe. I'm the founder of Opal 22 Arts and Edutainment. Hopefully a lot of you have tapped into what we're doing already, so you might already know me, so I'm not going to go any further than that. So just to start this conversation off, I really wanted to just do a small video just to kind of get us into.
If you can hear us, Tara, you've gone again, I think. I can't hear you on my end. I don't know if Martin can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I'm just going to play a short video because I want people to kind of understand why we're talking about this and the reasons kind of behind it. So can we go with that?
A question I want to consider is Britain an institutionally racist country? So some commentators have been saying that Britain is a multicultural country, one of the best places to live in the world. But I think if you're black and you look at most of the indicators, then one would argue that that isn't the case. So if you take health, black people are more likely to die before white people in this country. Black women are more likely to lose their children in childbirth. You look at the criminal justice system, black people are overrepresented in the criminal justice system. You look at education, black people are overrepresented in the negative statistics and underrepresented in the positive statistics. So you look at any area of public life in Britain, one would say that the country in a sense is institutionally racist, that they are the sort of bold facts and figures. Oftentimes I think this gets placed in the idea of individuals, or that there are a few rotten apples, and if you get rid of those rotten apples, that then the system will be fine. But I think what this Meghan Markle incident sort of reveals is, in a sense, is that it's just the tip of the iceberg. That it's not just about individuals, it's about systems and structures in Britain, institutions that for decades have marginalised black people, treated them differently. And so my argument is, in the sense that if the system is systematically racist, then one can't just look at individuals, one has to think about systematic and structural change. Change that is going to empower black communities so that their full citizenship rights are valued and acknowledged.
So that video was really kind of an overthrow from what we were talking about last week, and to really follow on to what we've got to come. So today, my first question for you guys, can you hear me?
You've gone silent again, Tara.
Sorry, can you hear me? Did you say? Sorry, my first question for you guys is what does equality look like for black people in this country presently? Who wants to go in? Who wants to jump in on that one?
I'll start it. I don't start on the basis of equality, it's inequality. Equality is a pejorative term to oppress people. Equality is what people who oppress want people who are oppressed to aspire to. So I look at it, equality as a term to people who are struggling. And I go back to, at the moment, food banks. Working class people feel unequal. As a criminologist, when you feel unequal and you get blocked opportunity, crime, violence, self-harm becomes a projected issue. So where you see inequality play out is in public health statistics, criminal justice statistics, the disparity in education. So the question is which lens do we view the word equality?
And I think
so from my perspective, from the lens in which I view the word equality, to my constituency, it means very little. So where I sit on it is the way that we frame the terms that are ascribed to us. So I'm not really necessarily a lover of how the word equality is used to silence that narrative that we produce, that we're trying to reduce.
Okay, so I like that stance. Brian, have you got?
Yeah, I think what Martin, just related to Martin saying, is that asking the question for equality, and I think we should demand rather than ask the question. I think that's where the confusion is. We all want to ask the question, about equality or inequality, instead of demanding something rather than asking the question. So in Martin's case, Martin's exactly right in terms of how you balance that. You know what I mean? For me, you're supposed to demand it rather than ask the question. Too many of our decades we've been asking the question and not demanding it. And what does demand look like? I think that's the question I like to raise: is what does the demanding look like rather than the question look like? If we seek for this thing called equality or balanced equality.
I can answer that question before Cephas comes in. When I was growing up, and when most of us growing up, we talk about breaking the glass ceiling. And what that means, there's a benchmark that we aspire to, we can break through it. But the reality of it is there's two ceilings. There's the glass ceiling, which is tied to aspiration, which is tied to employment. And then you have the concrete ceiling, which is tied to politics and power. So for me, I have a doctorate, I'm 64, I'm educated, I've done lots of stuff. So the glass ceiling doesn't mean much to me because I've attained a certain level, but I still don't feel equal because the politicians that control and determine how I can navigate society are predominantly white and are positioned within a political system that is actually quite limiting to the aspirations I have. So therefore, for me, in terms of questioning and looking at that, what it's about is to first question the very term that's pushed to you. So when somebody says they're a bad man, when did they know there was a bad man? When people say that you're this and that, so therefore the social labeling, and I see words like inequality or equality, because inequality is a social determinant of health. So because we're oppressed, it makes us depressed, it makes us violent, it makes us do all sorts of stuff. That to me is a social determinant of health. So in a way, I believe that one of the things that we have to do, because politicians read, so we need to make sure that politicians read things that are framed in a way that they understand what's driven by the way that we present it. That's why the music that we produce, the theatre we produce, the popular culture that we produce is the vernacular that defines how we look at ourselves. The same way that Shakespeare and Charles Dickens is given to me as a benchmark for modern society, there's a counter narrative to that in the literature and the resources from the Harlem Renaissance to negritude to all of those movements. And young people like Cephas is a classic example that they are relevant, they are taking up the mantle, presenting it, representing it in a different way. So therefore, questioning the terms of reference to me is key before we talk about what it means.
Let's bring Cephas in.
Yeah, sorry, Cephas.
I said, no, blessings. For me, again, when I'm sat around people as well, and I'm listening to people like yourself that have, studied things and done it for many years, like I'm very much happy to sit back and listen at points, you know what I'm saying? So feel no way to take that mic when people need to hear what you've got to say as well. So, I hear what everyone's saying. I feel like my view on part of what Martin said as well is the idea that if we're looking at what does the equality look like, we can take it as deep as all of that, like who's asking the question, whose lens are we looking from, what's the context. I also feel like perhaps both don't exist in isolation of each other when you're talking about what does equality look like, so who's asking and in what context, but also what does inequality look like. And I feel like, again, in the West and in a kind of living within the landscape of those who were the oppressors in that respect, we can almost always focus on what does hope look like, and this never-ending idea of hope that we never get to, and shy away from actually what's the problem, which is what does inequality look like to the people that are going through the injustice. And those stories and those things are often not heard, you know what I mean, and often not given a platform. And when they are given a platform, or when they are heard, it's when I've seen it anyway, it's very often when it's filling the pockets of someone that's benefiting from the drama. Do you know what I'm saying? So again, where do you draw the line between the idea of empathy and empowerment and saying, whether it's the poor black people or poor, what we go through, in those type of terms, or whether it's looking at it or look at those that are in the majority. I'm saying, as Martin was talking about, you look at the landscape, you look at those who are representing our interests. A lot of the time they're not reflective of us, and when they are reflective of us, a lot of the times they don't get it. You know what I'm saying? Or they've had to almost become so much or lose so much of themselves and their identity that by the time they get to a position of influence, they no longer have the passion, the connection, the proximity to help us achieve parity. So again, for me, I think it's a question that we can go on for days. I'll end it with Letter to Zion. When I wrote Letter to Zion, I talk about both, right? So both don't exist in isolation. I start off by detailing the problem. I start off by detailing what inequality looked like to me, and why we're going through it, so I was in rest. And then I go off into talking about this vision. And what does this? If I could if I had a magic wand and I could wave it and say, boom, this is the world I want to see, what would that world look like? And start to describe that. But I take it out of the sky and out of this kind of, you know, warm, fuzzy idea into, well, my practical response to that is it X. And I feel like out of the question, people need to really start considering what's my part to play in that journey. You know what I mean? Because we can have the conversation for days with regards to what does it not look like, you know, how are people suffering, what's the disparity. But I think the greater question is what part am I playing in that journey?
And I also add to that, Cephas.
Yeah, man.
There was a Brazilian educator called Paulo Freire, and what he did, he created a thing called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and he showed disaffected poor people how to use education for change. A theatre practitioner called Augusto Boal applied the same thing using theatre in prisons. In my work in criminology, when I go into a wing in a prison, the prison governor's clear. Can you reduce violence? Can you stop people getting killed? Can you stop people selling drugs? And I think that what tends to happen is that endless conversation is in the confines of power. It suits people for black people to be going on endless conversations about definitions. If you're looking at like revolutionary politics, it's quite clear that if you're going to take a government out, know what you're going to replace it. And I think that one of the things, and I've seen this when we teach black studies around political blackness in particular, is that a lot of one of the things about what we do in black studies, when you come into the degree, your final project has to change something in the community, practically. I predominantly deal with the tail end of serious offenders who want to learn to read, write, reconnect to their children. So for me, everything that we do has a position that is about change. But what I've also learned is what they call in America, and you must know this or you've heard this, the word filibustering. When you want to put a thing through Parliament, it's how you stall it so it doesn't get through. And so therefore, not only do we have to learn the techniques of how to implement, we also have to learn the techniques of disrupting when they're trying to stall. And some of the people that stall, Malcolm X said this, you know, nowadays you don't get a white person that's going to come up and tell you rubbish. They'll get another black person to do it. So in some respects, the point that you said, it's the intersection and what does it mean? From my perspective, I meet a lot of young people say, oh, I'm an artist, so how many albums have you done? How many lives have you changed? How have you evaluated what you do? So from my point of view, one of the failures of the bourgeoisie and the black middle class in this country, the emerging black middle class, is they've failed to connect to where they need to connect. Because if we have all the knowledge and information and we're not passing it on to a generation who can use it more effectively, then all we're doing is we're filibustering. And that's Martin, why I said that this intergenerational and multi-generational work is about people like me saying to people like you, what is it you need? And if I've got it, then you take it, run with it, and pass it on. But the tendency is we hold on to
Mike, I hear what you're saying, but let me ask you a question, or let me just kind of open it up a little bit more. Young people feel they're equal now. They don't feel the inequality in terms of what we feel, as you stated, in terms of how do we feel equality. But young people who work with, that you work with and I work with, they don't see that equality. They feel they're equal already. Yeah? So they don't see the struggle yet. They feel they're equal unless something changes within their environment for them to question it. Yeah? So how do you capture them now when they feel that they're equal but they're not? You know, when did they start fighting for equality as young people? Because
Cephas, do you want to take that first?
It's interesting. Obviously, there's not ever one answer to these things, but everyone's journey is different, isn't it? So there's a lot of things that, when I look back in hindsight, I'm a very reflective human being that, you know, I might have done differently, or I might have spent more time doing it as in the rest, or I might have become more conscious of the black reality and, you know, pushed that a bit earlier. But actually, when I stand in the point of destiny I'm in right now, I look back and say, no, like I wouldn't change a thing, because everything I went through and everything I've done made me who I am today. And so I think there comes a place where we look at it and we could sit down and say, boom, like what should we say to them? But the reality of a lot of those people's positions who don't get it, who are continuing to, you know, block or do whatever else they're doing or act like it don't exist, is perhaps not much, because that might be their path. And no matter what you say to them, it's like, you know, when I try to tell my little bros, like save, try to get your first house at 21 or da. And as much as like, I wish I had someone that said that to me when I was coming up. You know what I mean? Like, somebody's that's not what's on their agenda. That's not in their universe right now. So sometimes we can waste a lot of our effort and our energy in trying to convince people whose immediate destiny and immediate reality and universe is not to change. And so, you know, I don't focus my energy on trying to change the reality of others. I try to focus on changing my reality, and in the hope of and in doing that, hopefully change the reality of others. So everything I do is a reflection on me and my lens and what I'm doing. And, you know, that's I guess the power of campaigning, that's the power of spoken word, that's the power of all these different things. That you have a platform and a voice where you can say some stuff, and if you articulate it and communicate in an interesting enough way, perhaps it can transcend, and perhaps, you know, people can glean from it and move with it how they move. But also the way I see it is the next person doesn't owe me anything. You know, as much as I would like to see this world, you know, just back to accountability. What am I doing, you know, to drive that conversation? So in closing, I don't know, man. I don't focus my time on going back to the next person saying, yo, this is what you need to do, and shaking him. I focus. A wise person once said to me, everyone won't agree and get on with anything you're doing. This when I was younger.
Yeah.
They said focus on the people that do.
Definitely.
When you focus your energy on the people that don't get it and don't want to get it, you can spend a lot of your time just fighting as opposed to progressing with the universe and the people that will align with what you're trying to do. So that's how I see things, innit?
100% agree with that sentiment. So I have another question for you, but what I want to do, I'm gonna throw the question out there, but then I'm gonna play a video, because with what we've been talking about, you know, my first question was what does equality look like? But then I'm looking at certain things at the moment, and are we looking for equality or are we looking for equity? Do you understand the terms and the difference between them? What I mean by that? Because equality is everybody getting the same thing and everybody being in the same platforms. But really and truly, we're coming from a different space. We're coming from a different level. So we don't need equality, because equality is not going to put us on the same par as everybody else. We need that little bit extra. And kind of comes back to last year when we were talking about Black Lives Matter, and everybody was going all out, well, not everybody, but people were saying all lives matter. We know all lives matter, but we need it more right now. So if we're looking for equality, we're looking for the same part. We don't need that, because we're coming from a different stance. So let me just play this video, and then I'm going to come back and pose that question for you. We good to go?
We are going to be running a race. However, your starting position in this race will be decided by the answers to questions that we are going to be asking you.
Sorry, what? It's a joke.
This activity is intended to explore how society favours one race over others.
People often confuse white privilege with being wealthy or being rich, and it isn't about that. What it's about is the absence of having to live with the consequences of racism.
Now, if the question applies to you, you will take a big step forward. If the answer to the question doesn't apply to you, you stay where you are.
I better win, man. Oh.
Okay, make sure you're on the start line. I see some cheaters already.
Yeah, fine.
Feet behind the line.
If English is your parents' first language, take a step forward.
Oh, yeah.
If you have ever been the only person in the room of your race, take a step backwards.
For God's sake!
If you've never been asked where you come from, take a step forward.
If you have never had to be worried about your family being stopped and searched, take a step forward.
I don't get worried about if people ask me to stop and search.
The divide widens, and the inequality of their position becomes clear.
This is just like not fair now. Farah. None of us are white. None of us are white. It's unfair.
The last question. If your parents have ever warned you about racism, take a step backwards.
we were about to start a race, is this a fair starting point for us all?
No.
Mackay, how do you feel standing there in the field of runners?
I kind of feel a bit alone. I can't really see. I'm literally just by myself, more or less. I'm just a bit frustrated and annoyed that society nowadays really isn't fair. And I just wish everybody could be equal.
Farah!
It's kind of frustrating that, like, me and Sarah are just standing at the back here while the majority of people who may be white are, like, standing right at the front. That just frustrates me a bit, because it's almost as in what society is today. I don't want this to be how it is, but it is, so it just gets a bit frustrating.
Henry, how are you feeling being right at the very front?
It feels quite weird because if you think about it, I think all of us should be at the same point, but sadly the questions, the way that they were put didn't favour some people, which I think is quite unfair.
On your marks, get set, go!
Video is it's young people and it's coming from a young person's perspective, and you can't avoid but recognise the inequalities that we're living with today. So back to that question, you know, I don't know who wants to take it on.
Well, I think it's about surviving. How do we give young people tools to survive? I think that's the key, you know, in terms of, you know, all the panel members talking about navigating through the certain systems, but are we giving them the tools to survive?
Exactly.
We've been through a system, we've been through all that, we've been through our own personal journeys.
When I'm talking to my parents and, you know, even, well, my grandparents aren't here anymore, but I know last year my aunties and my uncles were really angry that they'd fought and they'd tried and they thought that they'd kind of made a little headway for us, and the same with me and my children. You know, I thought I'd fought it, and to know that we are no further in all this time. Sorry, Brian, I talked over you as usual. Go for it.
No. Like I said, it's a perfect example with the 56 hoodie thing. It sets little
56
black men. Sorry, I apologise. It sets things in history where we can reflect to and reflect from, no matter how big or small. But are we doing enough? You know what I mean? Are we doing enough to give them the tool to survive the next generation? And that is the thing I'm always kind of searching for.
What do those tools look like?
I think we mentioned bits and bobs in terms of we don't want to force nobody in terms of this is what you need to do, but we want to set something tangible to really for them to grab onto, because you know young people now, they're fearless in terms of, you know what I mean, in terms of what they do, in terms they have the drive, they have all the things that we had. But it's that extra component to really, that survival skills. As young people will always use the word, everything is long, you know what I mean? And long is a good thing in sense, but that kind of stuff. So it's really in terms of the feedback from the panel, in terms of what survival can we give young people to move that conversation forward.
So is it equity or is it equality we're looking for?
Me, it's equity, because equality will never come because we're always asking for it rather than demanding it. When we start demanding it, then yes, that makes sense. But if we continue to ask for it, then no. You know, it's got to be equity. You can do a lot more with equity into the power, strength, and all that kind of stuff, rather than equality. If we all came equal tomorrow, we'll still be poor, or we'll still be rich, or we'll still be anything like that. It's that element there.
Sorry, Ray, I didn't mean to...
No, that it's just, you know, the panel obviously can...
Okay, who wants to take on that one from you two? Can I pass that?
I just had a couple of things. I'm going to put my criminology hat on. When I'm dealing with a youth who's got a life sentence and he's 17 and he's got 35 years to go, he's got to navigate 35 years in jail. When he gets out, he's got to navigate coming back to the community. He's got to navigate engaging with the victims that he's created. On another level, during COVID, black students have got to navigate the online experience because they're not allowed to come to university. So I look at both those words. From my perspective, it's also about needs. So from a point of view of negotiating those needs, it starts with having that conversation. Some youths, for them, the chaos that they live, you know, in the research that I've done around coping strategies, nihilism, where there's an absence of values, some people have more of a problem with life than they do death. There are some people my age, you know, I'm 64, and the issues that I'm facing when I look at the younger generation is that the more that I feel I'm disconnected, I have to reframe and reposition myself. And it's what Cephas says. What role do I now play? And many of us do not, as older people, we don't update ourselves to be relevant to that next generation. So in some respects, you know, we put the emphasis on the victim. That's what happens in criminal justice. It's always the victim who has to justify and explain themselves. Our young people are victims of society, history, poor decision making. Not every one of them. So therefore, those of us, not just white people, those of us who are qualified and have businesses, we also have to share some level of responsibility. So in some respects, we have to also address ourselves, because I can't expect a 16-year-old from Peckham or Handsworth or Moss Side who has been educated badly, who's suffering from digital poverty, who may be dyslexic or autistic, who may have got a family member who's died, to somehow define what they perceive to be equal, when all of the cumulative impacts, they never felt equal at school. They never felt equal because their mum's not being sort of supported by the NHS. So for me, it's complex. And I remember, you know, listening to Steve Harvey turn around and say, we have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's complex. Nowadays, yeah, I would say that society is structured where everything you can put something into a microwave, you can get stuff off your phone. But you scrape that away and it's complex. And we can't run away from how complex it is, which means if you're looking at the role, it's looking at what bit of that complexity can you work with, can you deal with, can you implement. But what happens is, when it comes to resourcing, we then become to like these superheroes where we think we can do everything. Sometimes a youth just wants a conversation. I remember when I saw Cephas's exhibition, a brethren of mine gave me a hooded top recently. And I can say this, I never really appreciated what it's like to walk into a shop, the way a youth would walk into a shop and get stopped. Well, when COVID first started, I had a hooded top on, baseball cap, puffer jacket. And trust me, I got grief. I couldn't say to the guy I got a doctorate. I couldn't say, look how qualified. I just had to navigate going into a shop to buy some food. So what I'm saying is, for me, those of us in positions of responsibility have to look critically and say, what role can we play? But to do that, I then have to go back to somebody like Cephas and say, yo, Cephas, this is what I think I'd like to do. He's going to say, well, actually, you may need to do it, but twist it slightly. And then there's an intergenerational connection. So maybe he says, give me some information so I can go uni. And that may be all I can do. And then when he goes to uni and gets a first, then we've got to make sure that the person that's involved in employability work can create an opportunity so that Cephas with his first has got a space in employability. And then when Cephas goes to the bank, that's banking. So it's part of a continuum. And at the moment, the fragmentation within the various sections of the black community makes dealing with complexity even more complex, more disjointed, and it becomes like a scenario, more like Get Out than it is changing stuff. So for me, it's accepting that it's complex, it's messy, it's uncomfortable, it's doable if we look at history, and rather than look at it in repeating facts and figures, we implement the bits of history that actually worked. Slaves brought their freedom. We ended slavery. It wasn't William Wilberforce. When it comes to colonialism, it was our struggles that ended it. So we may be able to learn something and apply it, but without young people being involved in the decision making, people like me can't move, because they're the ones that are on the front line of taking social impact in a way that we don't. So I think for my generation, and I meet this all the time, where the older people say, yo, boy, you can't talk to them youth there, you know, you can't talk to the youth them. Well, you can. But you can't talk to them if the language you're speaking is oppressive. You're not going to talk to them if the language you're speaking is judgmental. You're not going to speak to them if all you want to do is put them and stand on the naughty step and they're 22 years of age because they happen to have done something that you don't approve with. So I look at it.
Martin, let me just ask a quick question there. You said it's complex, yeah? But then you told us the solution. So yes, I hear it's complex, but then you told us the solution. So is it actually complex, or is it just delivery?
Well, no. When I talk about complex, I'll give you an example. A student come to me the other day and self-identified as non-binary, a black student. Now, on surface, most of us don't know what it means. We know that it's a term that there's a lot of argument. So I asked the student. So we were having this conversation, and I know the sociology of non-binary, because binary means two, non-binary means you sit in the middle. So we were talking, and she was explaining it to me. And then I told her, as a 64-year-old man, my testosterone level's gone down, my estrogen level has come up, which means they're kind of meeting in the middle. So I'm more emotional than I used to be, but my testosterone is coming down. Now, experiencing midlife is complex to me, but when I heard the student say to me what non-binary was, I realized as a 64-year-old, I'm experiencing some of the symptoms that she's going through. But we had to listen to each other. So the complexity is, this is how uncomfortable it is, but when we're having a simple conversation, we found common ground. So the difficulty we have is to find common ground across generations, across class, all these kind of things. So my point being is, a jigsaw is complicated, but you can do it. Cooking chicken is complicated when you look at all the ingredients. But if you put the ingredients together, then you can actually. Well, if you put all I'm saying is, once you've got the ingredients, it's like when you speak to black students about theorizing. They see theorizing as abstract concepts until you provide them with examples that they relate to of how you apply it. And what I'm dealing with is, young people's lives are not complicated. They're only complicated when adults disconnect from the pain and the hurt. So my point is the fact that we've fought and won revolutions. We've created, we've invented. You know, if you look at the way the Egyptians built the pyramids, I don't know from an engineering standpoint how the hell they did it. It was complex. What I do know is they did do it. So if you study Egyptology, if you study the mechanics, if you study how the structures were built, all you got to do, if personally speaking, when I'm in a prison, if I met someone like Stormzy or a grime artist, and I knew I could say, yo, this is how they built the pyramids. Can you spit a couple bars? The moment that man goes into jail, like Stormzy, spits a couple bars about this is how they built the pyramids, every one of them youths is going to go down the library and say, yo, can you read the book to me if they can't read? So what I'm dealing with is, our lives are complex, but they're made more complex when we don't address and get engaged with it. And I'm saying one thing I love about the youths, and one example, and I'll finish on this. My son come to me recently and he goes, yo, Dad, jump on the gram. Now, when I was growing up, a gram was a radiogram. It's what you played music on. And I said, yo, son, what do you mean the gram? And he said, Instagram. And I said, yo, why the hell didn't you say Instagram? He said, yo, Dad, because we say gram. So then I realized when I'm with my son and his friends, I'm having to engage with the language that defines their reality. Now I know that I can go back into university. And the moment I say, yo, jump on the gram, students will go, yo, my man knows, he understands. So what it is, it's unlearning and relearning. So I unlearn a lot of stuff as though as an adult and relearn based on what the youths are telling me. And some of the time it comes out as a drill lyric, rhyme, trap. Other times it comes out that entrepreneur that wants to make $1 million. I've got a clue how he does it till he explains it. So what I'm dealing with is, it's simple, but complexity. And it's like, say that game Othello, it takes a minute to learn, but a lifetime to master.
So
for me,
the answer to the question is somewhere in the middle for you. Did you hear? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. So engaging from that response, you kind of it's not equality, but it's not equity either. It's somewhere.
To me, what it's about is identifying what the need is and satisfying it. Because Cephas already said it. That if you look at words like equity, equality, diversity, and inclusion, you can spend ages with definition.
True.
What's clear, when a youth's in pain, he wants the pain to stop.
Sure.
When a youth is broke, he wants to be able to live. When he's cold, he or she wants to eat. If you're hungry, you want food. So therefore, part of it is satisfying the need. And the reason it scares a lot of people off, because it means you've got to do something. Okay. And a lot of us don't want to do something. It's the elephant in the room. We like to talk about it. And what I remember when I first heard the term gassing. Now, if you take the word gaslighting, which is used against us, it came from a film, which is reverse psychology. And a lot of us gas. We gas too much.
Yeah.
So my point being is, it's about accountability and responsibility. Because those that know better should do better.
Definitely.
Well, what happens is, and if you, and I just want to finish. Sorry, Cephas. Sorry.
That's all right. Let me bring Cephas.
Don't get me started on this one. Cephas, take it off, my brethren. Here's the baton. Take it.
Listen, thank you for passing. I'm happy to contribute, but listen, Martin's saying a lot of stuff, man. Like, so I'm happy to listen at the same time. You want me to say something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bail me out, brethren.
Hey, listen, you don't need bailing, fam. You got a lot of things that you're passing, and I hope people are collecting. But yeah, man. I guess if I can be privileged enough to kind of take over from what Martin was very eloquently stitching together, a very interesting question becomes, do you inherit the world from generations past, or are you borrowing the world from generations to come? And when you initially were speaking about equity, Tara, you're talking about kind of, and you explained it with regards to equality, and basically the difference being, it's not about us having the same thing, it's about what we get given being more because perhaps we were less. But I want to add a different perspective to it, because equity is not necessarily just about the more and the less piece. It's also about people in power. And a lot of the time, to achieve equity, some people in power have to hand over that power. So it's not necessarily about us getting a leg up. The dynamics of equity can wear many faces and manifest in many ways. And I think, just to Martin's point with regards to why it's complex, what makes life difficult is the coexistence of different realities. But interestingly enough, it's also what makes life beautiful. So when Martin's talking about the complexity, what I'm hearing and I'm vibing with and I'm getting beyond what he's already kind of eloquently said is, you can't control the next human being in it. Like, so that is really what makes it complex, because as much as you might want a particular thing to change, if the next human being's on a different flex, you know what I mean? You've got to, well, you can't change it, but what you can do is engage in dialogue, is communicate. And a lot of the time we don't value, a lot of the time I feel like we don't value the importance of another human experience. And so we walk life through our own lens, and we try, and very often I see people, and myself, I've been part of that trap at points in my life, present a perfect idea of ourselves, or this is, and I say in Letter to Zion, like, I said this many years ago, but I crystallized it in Letter to Zion, the closest thing to perfection is reflection. And this idea that, are we reflecting, are we looking back on the world we're leaving for the next generation that's taking it on after us? And as opposed to trying to create this idea of perfection or cover up all of our inadequacies as perfect moments, if we reflect, and that power to reflect, as Martin was talking about, is very simple. What's the need, and are we fulfilling the need? But we make it more complicated of a lot of different things. And also, as Martin was explaining, like, there's so many different points of reference to any one journey, and he gave a very linear journey of someone going to university and all the different people they might meet along the way. But it is so complex because so many different people play so many different roles into the success of the idea of equity. Do you know what I mean? And that then goes off into power structures and prevailing power structures, and whether the prevailing power structures want equity or not. But that's the beauty in the ability to have a voice and to use your voice to give birth to new thought processes. And, even back to what he was saying about the hoodie piece, 100% there's that, but equally just the color of our skin. I went to Zara today, for example, with my wife. We're doing a joint birthday situation tomorrow, so I was buying some jeans, and I went over, they didn't have the jeans in my size, so I went over with my son and my wife. I said, let me order them and get them delivered to the house very quick. She said, okay. Went on to type the thing. I said, can I get it to come tomorrow or Saturday? And she says, no, it's not going to happen. I said, okay, no problem. When's the earliest they can come? She said, it's going to come next week. So I said, okay, no, like I need it for tomorrow, but I like the jeans. Let me get them anyways. So I'm typing in my details and I said, let me go back and just see. And I go back and I see next day delivery, £4.99. So I say to the lady, for context, she's a white lady from like Spain or something with the accent. I said, how come you didn't tell me? Like I said, it says it right here, it's £4.99. I said, how come you didn't tell me I could get next day, tomorrow, for £4.99? She said, I said, how come you didn't tell me? She said, because it's £4.99. And I says to her, but then, so I said to her, so for me, you've assumed that I don't want to know the information because of the price. I said, I don't care if it's £100 or £1. I just wanted to know. Now, she didn't like the fact that, I guess, confident black man was telling her the situations like, yo, just tell me the things. So she got frustrated and it became an ego situation. Then the manager came and the other guy came, you know, don't say it. Because what happened when I said that to her and I was trying to establish it, she tried to brush it off. But for me, I'm fed up. Like, you need to learn today that don't approach us like that, Prof. If I'm telling you I want to get it tomorrow, don't assume I don't want to do it because it's £4.99. Whether you're doing it because you want to be racist or you're doing it because of the idea of, you know, inequality or how you see me or not, that's my experience as a customer. I don't want to go to every different place and be treated like that. And that's my reality. So when you say it to me like that, that's how it's taken. So she then goes, I'm a call security. And it was so wild. Like the white lady behind her is laughing. Like, it's like, security? I'm about to make a purchase. I'm just telling you that next time, let us know, innit? And you want to call security? She slams the thing and walks off. The next person comes, slams the thing and walks off. The manager comes. And I'm looking at the things. I'm like, this is not going to end in my lifetime. But equally, I'm looking at the things like when you hear Martin talk about the complexities of the idea of equity, it's beyond like just any one human being. How do you, and I'm looking at the manager comes, well, I'm helping you, aren't I? I'm helping you make the purchase. And I'm looking at this woman in her face, white lady again, from one of these countries. I say, I'm going to make the purchase anyway. And I even feel like a mug still making a purchase, but that's not helping me. You've not even approached me as a human being. So you're looking at this thing and it's so complex that, and I said to her, I don't even know if you've got the ability to understand what I'm going through.
Now, Cephas, can I just add something to what you're saying? Because I want to give a practical example. When you was there, you was in a pressurized situation and there was disproportionate treatment. And the way that you do it, if you'd have come out the queue and let them serve someone else with the same question, you would have seen the differential treatment. Yep. Now, when we talk about needs, let's say I was with you and you getting emotional. Why? Because you've been challenged. There's no reason for it. You're getting upset. But imagine if I pulled you out the queue and then I whispered in your ear, go and ask the manager for the counter assistant's job description. And if it says in the job description, they can give differential treatment, then they can do it. But if they can't, they're in breach of their contract. And in that case, the manager could call the police. But what you could argue that under the law, you've showed preferential or differential treatment. The reality of it is the fact that there is a legal defense called black rage, same as road rage. It was established in 1846. And what it is that it's proven within society that racism has temporary lapses in control, temporary lapses of emotion. And then what happens when the police comes, they get you at the heightened point of the emotion, and 100%. Under the law, you 100%. Can get stopped and searched, which is what happened in the other shop.
Or you can get sued out here.
Yeah, so my point being is, if you look at that one moment and you said, yo, I'm distressed, I'm upset, my son witnessed it, my wife witnessed it, I could have gone to jail if I'd had a fight.
100%.
Then if I'd have witnessed that, then at that moment in time, what you need is to look at that situation with someone like me, observing it, unpack it, discharge your distress, form a strategy for how you're going to deal with that so it doesn't happen to someone else who may not be like you, who may just jump over the counter, slap the person.
100, but hear what, Martin, and I'm conscious as well that they probably want to ask us a couple more questions, so I don't want to just take off of that, but hear what, when I'm looking at blessings, when I'm looking at the things, and you was talking to me about the blue water thing before we started, when I looked at the situation, I'm looking at this lady and she doesn't even have the mental capacity to understand what it is I'm going through, I'm dealing with here. So I'm like, okay, cool. But the issue, and I just end up, the issue, we need our own Zara at that point. Or we need to be influential enough. I'm not trying to sit there and unpack the situation, even though I don't feel like that will work. You need black people that are still connected, that are influential themselves and are able to speak truth to power. if I could call the CEO of Zara and I'll pause it there and say, yo, boom, this is what I just experienced in your store in Oxford Street, and they could cascade it from that level of influence, it's not going to happen many times, because they will realize that, right, okay, it could be any, like, you can't just pull up on black people like that. So even when I started explaining it to the woman and she started saying all this, I said to her, had that been an older white man, and I said, excuse me, I'd like to get it for tomorrow and X, Y, Z and the rest, would she or would she not have given me the option? She said,
can I just add before you come to the question, I just want to give Cephas something, because this is really important.
Yeah.
Most major department stores racially profile, the
100%.
same way they do on the street. But the reality of it is, if you wanted to speak to the CEO of the store and you could demonstrate through experience, other people's experience, that there is racial profiling tied to the way they perceive, then what you will do in the adverse publicity, in the way that that can be platformed, you would have a conversation. The way that you, because when you look at your 56 pictures, you got that. So what I'm dealing with is, but unless you're going to have somebody like me who relates to somebody like you, and we get together and we share it and work out a strategy, which means that not only is there have to be an intergenerational strategy, but there has to be an implementation team. Because if you're upset and vexed, you may not be the best person to represent the issue.
100%.
What it's about is say to you, who's best placed to represent it? Now, it may be you do the Britain's Got Talent thing, you got a 6-year-old son, and say, speak to my son, and he goes, I see my daddy get upset. It could be him. It could be me. It could be an elder. It could be that white woman who stood up, whatever it is, that we're all complicit in the observation of black people's distress.
100%.
And on that basis, that what we're dealing with is nothing to do with the construction of society that's racist. What we're dealing with is emotional, we're dealing with a public health issue. Because unfortunately, as a black man in a shop, you can't afford to lose it. Why? Because the consequences of doing it.
I just like to have one thing. That probably wouldn't happen to Martin, because Martin is a senior citizen and they would expect people in a situation.
I do have to move on to the next part. But I'm going to play a video which kind of follows in from what we're talking about now. We did this video, I think it was about 3 years ago, and it was really as a response to Cephas's 56 Black Men. I'm just going to play it. Can you hear? When we're playing the videos, can you hear it?
No, but it's fine. You can tell us after.
Yeah, I can't hear it. I can hear that midlife man next to you though.
Okay, all right, I'm going to move on from that one. All right, if we just play the video, so other people can hear it. It's basically, it was a poet. Why can I not think of his name right now? It's Tyrone Horton. He did this book for us 3 years ago, and it's very powerful. What I'll do, I will send it to you afterwards. I should have sent it to you before, so apologies.
Born Romans and Babylonians who inflicted colonialism on my black organism, I can't forgive them. They warped religion and blurred my vision, had me stitched into their twisted system. They taught me they done more than any more, locked in a morgue, then sampled what my people made and made it something my people can't afford. In hiding our great inventors, they must be relentless, because that list is so extensive. A lot of money is made from our intellectual property, but a black man's soul is so not expensive, because we are just cheap meat at the market. White punters kick an ugly penny from our carcass, and it's marvelous how that mindset is a part of us now. We walk as broken kings so far from our crowns. That's why we feel stuck on potential, nothing named successful. It's too stressful trying to make it out of this cesspool, aiming to be accepted by white faces in high places, thinking my polite graces might erase this awkward feeling that we both share. Slave auction, we were both there. Just had a different reasoning, different colors, different palette, foods got a different seasoning. So the Caribbean Sea stirs with the blood of my ancestors, seabed filled with black sons and daughters. And you wonder why a black man afraid of water? For I am not your Negro, not your villain, not your anti-hero. I am not your prisoner, not your cellmate, not your cultural food bank. I am not your menace, not your blemish. I am not your fetish, not your entertainment, not your athlete, nor am I your token. I was and am still king. Still got the power of the sun in the pigment of my skin. My blood is still Detroit red. My words are James Baldwin live in the flesh. I am every year Nelson Mandela spent in a cell. I am dark as how. Still running the race today and my pace is only getting quicker. Catching up to the white tribe like, who you calling a nigger? I am every single wave swaying the slaves from Kunta Kinte Island and Sierra Leone. I am the fear of the unknown, the power of the sun that ignites my soul. I am whole, never been 3/5 of no man. My mind is expansive, it can never fit into the grips of your hands. But why must you treat me different? Is it simply just my pigment? It's not a figment of my imagination. You'd be ignorant to say we're not living in a malignant type of nation. Why must you move the goalpost, yet expect me to score most? We all inhabit the same space. Only difference, you inherited a map to this maze. So we just feel like we're still trapped in this cage because white forefathers believe there are shades to the way people behave. See, I was born human. I crawled my way to black and now I walk as a nigger. Every day I feel blacker and blacker. And these views all came from you. I came into this world pure-hearted. You can't undo what you started.
So, I think we're back. We're back. So, right, after that was Tyrone as saying it, and the response was kind of looking at where we are now and how we move forward, and just kind of see us for who we are. Now, to move on to the next question. Do you feel, especially, I think it really follows in nicely to what you were talking about earlier, Cephas and Martin, because how comfortable do you feel discussing matters of racism with your white friends?
Go on, Martin.
I'll start first. I was in Baltimore. I was working in Baltimore. I was working with the Crips and the Bloods. And there was a guy there called Lester Spence. And he said, I go to a black shop to buy food. I go to a black church. I go to a black shopping mall. And he just went on and on and on. And the question was, why do you say that? He says, because I refuse to defend my racial existence. I've never had a middle-class white person apologize for being white and middle class. So not only do I not feel away, I remember recently when George Floyd died, I was phoned up and there was a colleague of mine at work. And she came to me and she goes, Martin, I really want to get involved in this. Can you recommend 6 books I could read about black people? And I said to her, does that mean if I read 6 books by Judith Butler, 3 women a week are not going to get murdered? I said, if I'm going to challenge patriarchy and my own values as a man in relation to women, I have to immerse myself in the lives of women. So the way I see it, every facet of my life is shaped by white expectations. And my response to that sometimes is accommodating, because there's times when I go to spaces that are comfortable. So not only do I don't feel no way, but I also feel that in my own sense of authenticity, that I am just a voice with my experiences. And therefore, if my white friends or white people that I come into contact, and I do this intellectually. I remember when I said I do critical race theory. And I remember I had an ethics committee and I had 7 white professors who said to me, they looked at my work and said, Martin, in your literature review, you haven't put any white people. I said, okay, has everybody agreed? 7 professors. And I said to them, are you all agreed? And said, yeah, we feel that you need to put white people in your literature review. I said, okay, you've all got PhDs. Did you put any black people in your literature reviews? They said no. So I said, the contribution to knowledge based on a PhD means that if you'd have put me in your literature review, I wouldn't have to do a literature review with no white people in it. And then it was like, oh, we're really sorry. So then they asked me about critical race theory. And they said, well, Martin, don't you think 32 semi-structured interviews is too small for a PhD? And I said, in critical race theory, the total within a class that's used to assess critical race theory is 32. So I'm in keeping within a legitimate theoretical position. My point being is I don't have to justify my existence. If I'm oppressive, I'll apologize. If I'm aggressive, then I'll apologize. But if it's the base of me asserting my difference, which is the history, the politics, my beliefs, if I want to say, yo, Bridget, wagwan, then I'm going to say that. Because when I go and watch Shakespeare, I embrace Shakespeare's language. When I listen to Charles Dickens, but I also embrace Stormzy and Little Wayne and Drake. I also embrace, if I'm in London and I say you from South London, who goes, all right, mate. And I'm not from London. What I'm dealing with is, so not only do I not apologize for it, but I can tell you one thing. I had a guy about 4 years ago called me the N-word. And I'm going to use it in this context, and it's contextualized. A guy called me a nigger. And I said, yeah, I'm a nigger with a PhD. And the relevance of it is, if you're going to define me that way, just put the other bit on it. So my point being is that to do that, you have to be confident and free from the shackles of what we call moderate blackness. It's called stereotype threat. For many black people, when they feel that their difference is going to be stereotyped, they moderate it. And what I'm dealing with is, no, that's not the case. Because my son, he speaks a particular way, and I don't want him to be discriminated because it sounds different. That's the problem. So for me, it's not an issue. Intellectually, politically, socially, culturally, no. And you know why I can say that? Because I've got a PhD. I'm still from the road back. I'm still from a street background. I still like rice and peas, but I like chips. I eat Kentucky Fried Chicken sometimes, but I also like to go to 5-star hotels. I like drill, trap, grime, hip hop, but I love jazz and I listen to classical music. Why? Because I embrace everything that's on offer in my life, because life's too short for me to be oppressed until the day that I die. And Martin Luther King said, I've seen the promised land and I may not get there. Well, Bob Marley talked about the same thing, about heaven is under the earth. And sometimes, so from my perspective, not only am I not going to apologize for it, but I'm going to actually correct people when they say, you need to, I've had it all my life. You need to talk to me better than that. No. And it's one thing that Cephas said is this. Sometimes our expectations are bound to white expectations. Who says we need a university building like this? You can do it in a recording studio. You can do it on a street corner. So I look at it. I've studied, I've read, but one thing I've learned is the people that went before me, they said no. They'd prefer to die and drown, throw themselves over a river. Toni Morrison killed a child than put the child in slavery. So for me, if I'm honoring the ancestors, they didn't put me on this earth to apologize for my difference when I'm not breaking the law, when I'm not hurting anybody, just because I offend people's sensibilities. Well, no. You own your oppressive attitude. But remember, if your son's in my class and he expresses it, he's not on a degree program because it's illegal to present it to me. So I'm sorry to be long-winded about it, but a lot of the times we come on these things and we like to apologize because, well, no, I'm not apologizing. But I also want to apologize to the black bourgeoisie who, when they say to me sometimes, look, Mike, if you're going to come and talk, can you just tone it down? Well, no, don't invite me to a funding meeting then. If you feel that you're going to lose your grant, fine. But if you need another doctor, go and find someone else who's going to pander to what you're doing. And that's not a good example to show to younger people who we're telling, liberate yourself, and we ourselves are subservient. No, it's a mixed message.
I want to pass it on to both of these guys, and I'll explain why afterwards. Brian, Cephas, who wants to take it?
Brian can go. I've not heard Brian so much, so happy.
Well, I think one has to kind of answer where you're at in terms of that, and I agree with exactly what you're saying. I know that same principle is important, you know what I mean? But that principle comes with age and understanding in terms of that. So for us, it fits nicely, but we can deal with that, you know what I mean? And, you know, every black woman knows we have to be a chameleon, you know, in the workplace when we interact with other white people, other people. We have to be chameleons anyway. So we taught from a very young age how to navigate, you know. But Can our next generation do that? Can they navigate in that way? Martin demonstrated he can navigate, I can navigate, and so Steve can navigate. So I can expect how he navigates, but it's an art form in the mastered over the years, and I see young people that struggle with that navigation stuff, with that chameleon form of, going through society, fitting in, don't have to fit in my mindset. Ignore any environment, I'm not any environment, and change my tone to make me feel comfortable or uncomfortable. So yeah, into what Michael's saying, I agree 100% into what you're saying, but put it to our younger generation, can they do the same thing? It's the card. What tools can we give them to start and learn to be chameleons and navigate for their generation?
I just want to answer that before Cephas comes in. In indigenous cultures, Native American and the Inuits in Canada, you hear this thing about walking in your father's footsteps. When a hunter is going to kill a bear, his son walks in the footsteps in the snow. Now, a lot of us, we don't want to take a youth into a meeting. Well, take the youth into the meeting. When that guy comes out of jail, go into the library and show him a better example. So at the end of the day, but what you have to do is challenge your own sensibilities, because we don't like youths who swear, who smell, who are grimy. My point of view is those who know better can do better. Yes, it does come with age, but I know some 17 and 18-year-olds who are looking after their parents right now who have got dementia or they're ill, and they're doing a very good job. So my argument is, who are we trying to fool here? A lot of our adults, when they've got their house, their car, they've got what they want from society, they distance themselves. And that's the historical fact, that they distance themselves from the very same people that they want to cling to when they get racist abuse. So when they're in the workplace, it's like, yo, I want to be part of this. But the moment they start getting racist, what do they want to do? They call Uncle Reuben when their car gets stolen. They call their cousin Leroy when the car gets stolen or somebody troubles them. So at the end of the day, it's about accepting the sum total of your parts. And my thing is, when I get buried, I want people like Cephas to stand next to some of my ex-offender friends, to stand next to some of our white colleagues who've had to stand down there if I'm going to fight somebody, and they stood in the middle and they take the lick on my behalf. So my point of view is this. Yes, they need to navigate it, but they can only navigate it if people put them in spaces when they get access. A lot of our youths don't get access to space. So if you're going to go on a bus with them. If they're going to go to a shopping centre, go with them. If I was with Cephas, and I know for a fact, he said, yo, Martin, I get hot when I'm in these places because I'm sick of it. Then I need to say, yo, Brendan, let me be with you so that I can calm you down so we don't get a drama. So what we're doing is everything's Eurocentric. In a sense, it's the individual. Bring back the collective. And what I'm saying is it's accountability. And a lot of us who absent ourselves from drama don't turn up at the crime scene only till there's a photo opportunity or a camera opportunity. We need to get a grip on that, because if you don't, that same black youth is going to come looking for you. So at the end of the day, my point is, I'm not saying I told you it's complex, but what I am saying is everybody has to know their role, get straight with themselves, say they can do it or they can't do it. But if you absent yourself, history will show you'll get what you don't put in. And if you don't, in banking, if you don't put nothing in, you can't draw out. And in the community, if you don't put nothing in, you can't pull out on it. And I get emotional about it because what it is, we're still putting the emphasis on young people to change young people's lives. And I'm saying that we, as older people, have to stop giving excuses and stop blaming the generation who've been let down. And we need to address ourselves in relationship to them and go and atone and redeem ourselves so that it doesn't become just their struggle.
So thank you, Martin. Let's bring Cephas in on that as well now. I totally agree with that point then.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of context. I think just to set the record straight as well, because Martin speaks a lot in analogy and anecdote, which is very powerful. For me, I feel like I've got the grace to go in those situations. I know Martin knows that as well from the brief conversation we had earlier about how I navigated blue water, for one example. But where also we are aligned is, if I get bad customer service, or if I get, different treatment I don't like, I'm not going to hold my tongue about how I feel because I'm black and the optics mean X, as long as I'm not. So when we had a building in Peckham, we're redeveloping that building as a creative hub. And, the WeWork or the creative industry is what we're looking at. And at the time I was in conversations to scale up, we were looking at a building that was 22,000 square foot. stretched across 2 floors. I'd raised on paper around $1 million. We were looking at capital contributions from the building owners for $1 million. I was in front of a £70 million regeneration match fund. And I tell you that just to set some context for the scale of what I was doing at that point. And before all of that kind of was picking up, we was in a smaller space in Peckham that we redeveloped, and it was popping. And the council, one of their minions, called the police because they wanted us out of the building. And the police came and said, we've been told that some people have broken into this building. So I said, what does it say on your scanners? And they say, we got that 2 black boys have broken into a block of flats. Now, my first response to the police was, does this look like a block of flats to you? And that's a reasonable question. You've been told that 2 black boys have broken into a block of flats, but here you are at a commercial premises. So just to what Martin was saying, and to make sure that the viewers don't leave this notion that perhaps for me it's just a confrontational thing. For me, it's about being able to exercise my right as a human. And a lot of the time as black people, and it's me, is my journey, that right, and as Martin has articulated, that right to be yourself, your most authentic self, whatever that may come across as sounding like, is stripped away from me as a black person because it makes someone else feel uncomfortable. And so the Zara situation, the reason why the woman said, I'm going to call security, is because she could not stand that a black man calmly told her about the situation and said, next time, let me know. Let the man, let people know that that's the, if I ask you, I want it to. So again, like, I wanted to give context to that particular piece that so the viewers listening get that he's speaking in anecdote and not directly to me, because the way I've been able to navigate it has been like something I've not seen in my lifetime. And I also don't toot my own horn much, but I think, it's good for people to actually understand the reality of the program I'm driving behind the scenes. And so, Martin mentioned Blue Water before the recording, and I was harassed in Blue Water, them things. The privilege of the position I play within the landscape strategically, and the privilege of my grace, is that I can handle the situation like that, and I can speak to the CEO of Land Securities, and I can navigate it that way, because that's the universe I live in behind the scenes. But it's a lot of people that don't necessarily have that as an outlet, or don't necessarily have that understanding. They're not at that part of their journey. And so again, I'm for us coming together, as Martin is preaching, and for us doing that intergenerational, and one person ain't gonna move this thing. The beast of systemic racism is much older than all of us put together. You know what I'm saying? So it's gonna take, as some say, the wisdom of the elders and the energy of the youth, and all these different things. So sometimes it's the energy of the elders and the wisdom of the youth. Like, it doesn't necessarily manifest itself in one way, but it's going to take all these different things coming together to move it. But for me, like, I'm navigating that in a particular way behind the scenes. And I know we've moved on from since different people took the mic, we moved on from the conversation of what is equity, and how that works. But, for me, that's where I'm at. And again, going back full circle, like, for everyone to just focus on what they can bring to the table. I love what Martin's saying. I love the truth in it. I love the idea and the reality. And, he's speaking more so from an elder perspective, like what we need to be doing and their accountability, you know what I mean? And bringing that to the table. And I hear it. I love it. I'm here for that conversation. But, I'm less interested in this. I will do this because I believe that your platform is set up to really push it forward. And even if it doesn't necessarily change the whole trajectory right now, it will serve as a moment in history, and people will be able to listen back to this in 20 years time, 30 years time, 50 years time. But what I really live for is when I log off of this, I'm back to work. I'm probably going to take a break after this, spend some time with my wife and my son, and I'm going to be up all night because I need to catch up on some work. But that's what I'm driving. So the question, and I'll end it on there, was how comfortable do we feel speaking to our white counterparts about these, our friends about these things? So when I look at the Black British Network, for example, we've signed up 17 of some of the biggest companies in the country and in the world. So we've got Tesco signed up, we've got Unilever signed up, we've got Ernst & Young signed up, the Sainsbury's, the Co-op Group, Publicis Group, Salesforce, Accenture. And again, we signed them up from the CEOs down. And this has been my network and my reality for many years. Pause. But a lot of people won't deep that because they're only used to seeing the relevance in Black people if they're really famous, if they're a football player. So if I'm not a football player and I'm not a rapper, then I walk into the room, even though I'm an extremely influential person behind the scenes, and it's been that way for many years. People are, oh, that's the dude that, you did 56 and then something happened. Nah, G, like there's a lot of, it didn't just happen. 50 didn't just happen. You know what I mean? There's a lot of strategic things.
That's one of my questions, because I know 56 black men happened quite a while before George Floyd, and you mentioned that being part of it. But what was the reason? What kind of led you? How did you come to do that? What was what was it about? But not what was it about?
Yeah, no, I get it. I'll try to be quick, conscious of your time. But you know, I spoke about Drummer Boy Studio. So again, I was in front of £1 million capital contribution, 22,000 square feet of a building stretched across 2 floors, another mill for social and private investment, 70 million regeneration match fund. I'd confirmed the second largest architectural practice on paper to be my development partner. We were talking the worlds of music, media, film, fashion, enterprise, gaming. I was speaking with CEOs from across all of those industries, some of the biggest companies in the different sectors. So again, this is way before 56, by the way. Now, that conversation was very much about social mobility and was not necessarily black focused, and really about how we led on an empowerment piece that was curated and put together by people who the experience belongs to. But a lot of the times we're having people coming and creating stuff, because my background is I studied architecture, but we have people creating these things in our community that have no proximity to the communities that they're creating for. So my thing was to try and revolutionize that, and I was doing a sick job in doing that. Then the council tried to Jake man and do a madness, and you know, they had the then landlord doing a madness, you know, changing the locks, and they called the police. 2 black boys are broken, and they just were trying to frustrate our efforts to even trade in the smaller space. So man couldn't even really trade. So I then got a lot of my senior contacts to contact the leader of the council at the time. It was Southwark, so Peter John. Then they realised who man was, because again, if you're not famous or if you're not a football player, they don't think you're anything important as a black person. But had I not been a black man, there's no way I could be in the conversations I'm in and driving the change I'm driving and not be taken seriously, let alone them man trying to block me. So when they finally realised that there's a number of powerful white people that called Peter John or wrote Peter John a letter, or his office, called Peter John's office, wrote Peter John a direct letter, that's when they called me into the office to speak. Like, who is this guy? And why are these CEOs and sending us? And so we sat down with them, and they still did. They're looking at man like I'm an idiot. And by the end of the 3-hour conversation, for context, the white guy that was presiding over the situation goes to me and my now wife, then partner. When it comes to black issues in the community, you don't talk directly to me. You talk to this one black guy and he talks to me. And that was the moment I said, in my lifetime, family, ain't nobody ever going to tell me that again. And not just me, I need to now focus on how we really change the dynamic for black people. And that was what I coined this phrase number of years back, called the second realization. And I feel like black people come to this point, everybody, some people, and I definitely came to a point where I realized for the second time that I was black, and it was in the face of some type of injustice. I go back to my studio, I'm sleeping in my studio at the time, and it was that coupled with every time I saw black people, it's always knife crime, or violence. But here I am in front of millions of pounds to invest in the community on my own terms, big ass building, largest architectural practice supporting me, and there's a lot of stuff I'm missing out of that story because of time. That is like, it's a movie, yeah? And I'm doing this, but nobody knows who I am. The media won't cover that. The media won't make it the headline. Cephas confirmed second largest architectural practice in Europe to be his development partner. Put that on the headline, slap that on the headline, and see what type of black boys we end up creating as time goes on, right? But it's the self-fulfilling idea and prophecy of this is the image we show you and this is who you will become. So again, when I was speaking to the council, all they saw was what they've been informed by the mainstream. They couldn't even see past this black youth. Even when leaders is telling them, man, like, we're working with the dude, like, back down. But that's all what, and then I had the dream, and in that dream, it was 56 black men, not the name, but the idea. So I woke up in my studio. I remember, like, clear as day, woke up, wrote down all these different ideas, off the back of the dream, and I sent the first messages out, and that's how 56 started. I walked away from the Drummer Boy opportunity and focused the mandate on bringing about that change. And I aligned my network, the leaders in my network. So different things, like from the Guardian article that David Lammy wrote, I was meant to write that article initially. So again, I spoke to the then CEO of the Guardian, David Pencil. He was someone I was involved in with Drummer Boy Studios at a different point. I said, yo, this is what I'm focusing on now. I'm focused on the 56 thing. So a lot of people see the manifestation, but they don't see the strategy that goes behind it and within it. So that's some of how that all happened. And I said to David, like, you know, David was in it, so I said, do you want to write it? Because people aren't expecting you to write it. And the reality of that conversation is always, man wasn't catting to get David involved like that. Someone recommended him. So I recommended a handful of people, and I asked the brothers to recommend the next person so that it doesn't just become Cephas' friends. Yeah. And someone recommended David and he got involved. And so post that, my interest is to just focus on aligning my network with the Black conversation so we can drive this agenda forward economically and in a way that speaks to change, equity, and holds those people to account. But my real passion beyond this is to leave this thing really and have a vehicle set up to drive it. I've got opportunity to make money, do different things, and use that money and use that influence to drive further change in humanity. If you go on my link to my website, my first thing is I'm a human being first, innit? Yeah. I'm saying, like, life adds all these different labels onto us, but I've had to focus on the Black conversation. So in closing, my conversations with white friends is very easy. And in fact, after George Floyd was murdered and my son was going to be born, 5 white men, as I said before, called me and said, yo, like, what can we do now? But they could only call me because we had the relationship. And for context, one of those people was Paul Pullman. Paul is the ex-global CEO of a company called Unilever. He's one of the most enlightened people I know, and someone I had the privilege in my lifetime to call friend. Simon Pegg, different people, and these are all white. So if them man are calling man saying what's popping, you know I'm already talking to them about the things. You know what I mean? Like, and not every day I'm pitching to them, but because we have a relationship, I don't even have to tell them the experience, because we might be having breakfast or we might be doing this, and they will see things because they are now part of the ecosystem and the universe I exist within. So
Cephas, can I just show you something? My students, with your exhibition, when it first came out, I had at least 6 white students who critiqued what they saw with the exhibition as part of one of their assignments, and most of them got a first. Because one of the things I say to my students is that to embrace people's differences means that you sometimes have to operate outside of your own.
Yep.
And what they did, they embraced 56 Black men as white people and actually saw a very different interpretation that's actually changed them significantly. So I just really wanted to share with you that in my work, it's about saying, what do you see? Where do you relate to it? What do you want to do with what you see? And what they became is stronger. So they started to understand George Floyd and all the other stuff. So I'm just saying to you,
started that journey sooner. I'm sorry to cut you, but it's interesting because you won't be the first person that said that to me, family. Like, I know people that done dissertations on 56.
Yeah.
So, but please continue. And but these are the things.
And that's what I'm trying to say to you is this.
I'm going to have to pull in the conversation in a minute.
All right. I just want to finish off on this. The same way you did 56, I knew coming up to my 50s, when I did my PhD, I was told I was too old. So I realized time was short. So what I set out to do is produce a body of work, like a legacy piece of work. And I went to 2 of the largest publishers in the world. I didn't want to self-publish. And as of like last week, my work's on all 7 continents and on over 500 degrees programs. The relevance of it is that the way a virus biologically spreads, it morphs. And all that has to happen is if what you're doing and what I'm doing and what they're doing becomes that same network and comes together. So the objective is, before these conversations happen, because the one thing I wanted to say to you, which is critical for me, is your autobiography needs to be on every W.H. Smith platform. So every commuter going from London to Manchester or London to Edinburgh or Edinburgh, Glasgow down to London. Because the other important thing is, it's the ideas that you have and the actualization of them that becomes the importance. So what I'm saying is, if you don't want to write your autobiography, there's people like me to say, this is how you do it. Why? Because your son needs to know that his dad existed, not just in terms of his attainment and his achievement, but also what his dad thought about and how he achieved what he thought.
Lessons. And
so I just want to share that.
I appreciate the value that, Tara and the team have placed on me to even invite me on the platform. And I appreciate the value that you also have placed on me and my voice to say something like that, man. And, I'm out here, man. Like I live like I'll die tomorrow, but I work like I'll live forever. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it's about the legacy.
And on that note, We were going to play Cephas's video just now, but we've gone over time. You lot talk too much, but it's been a good conversation, so I didn't mind going over. But for the audience, please look online at Cephas Williams' website. There's some great videos on there that he's put together. The one we were going to play was 9 minutes and 29 seconds, George Floyd digital demonstration. So if you do get a chance, go and see that. Also, Martin Glynn has got Ode to Rosa. Do you want to just give us the title of that?
Ode to Rosa, Desistance as a Social Movement.
That's right. Please go and have a look. You can find that on any YouTube. So I'd like to thank all my guests. Thank you, Brian, for being here. It's been a pleasure as usual. My sidekick, he's been around for a while. I'm hoping he doesn't leave me on my own too.
Yeah, well, tell Brian to stop eating the burgers.
I ain't gonna tell him that.
Well, I just told him. You know what I mean, Brian? Stop eating the burgers.
The plant-based burgers.
Sorry, you're done vegan now.
Thank you very much, Martin. It's been an absolute pleasure. Your knowledge and the way that you've presented it has just been outstanding. So thank you very, very much.
No problems.
It's a pleasure to see your work. It's a pleasure to know what you're doing next and what's going on in the future. So please stay in contact. Please let's all come together again at some point, and hopefully we can do this all together in one space next time. So from Open 22, it's been a great discussion. I appreciate you all for watching and everybody for tuning in. This has been Open 22, Arts and Entertainment. Thank you very much for funding tonight. We've been funded by the Arts Council East Midlands. And keep on watching us, and we'll be back with you next week where we are discussing is unconscious bias an excuse for racism. So look forward to seeing you. Bye.